Good
Good
morning.
morning. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good.
We
I
got a
just
full,
gotta stay hydrated.
oh yeah, we got a full week ahead, full 2 weeks ahead. So we got to just keep going and be busy. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I know. We were talking about earlier. It's just March just kind of creeps up on you, and suddenly we get so busy because there's a lot happening in March, apparently.
yeah, yeah. You get to like May 24th, and you're like, there's a whole nother week of February, or February 24th. There's a whole other week here, and then it turns out no, March starts like over the weekend.
Yeah. I
So
mean, like you wouldn't think you notice that February is a short month, but
you need
I
those
I
extra few
do.
days.
Yeah, I do. I'm like, oh no, it's March already. Um,
All right.
Yeah, and then
So
last week we did a lot of fun stuff at Energy Tech Nexus, and there were a lot of other great events happening in Houston. So maybe we can start by talking about Jason and I joined for the first time. Actually, should we do a little intro before?
no, let's just keep going. I
Just
think
keep going.
folks know
Okay,
I know. Yeah,
okay. People should know by now who we are and what we're doing.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so we Jason and I went to the Hetty Advisory Committee.
Mhm.
Do you want to start with maybe telling people if they don't know what Hetty is?
Yeah, HEDI stands for Houston Energy Transition Initiative. It's a group spun out of Greater Houston Partnership. So it's all like, I guess, Houston.org domain names. And folks buy a membership into the Greater Houston Partnership, but then they also can join HEDI as a separate group. And the Houston partnership is a little bit of a chamber of commerce that focuses on policy, focuses on regional economic development, and what they're trying to do is develop kind of a community, an ecosystem that brings companies to Houston for the energy transition. And I think it's really something that kind of started in that 2019, 2020 era when the city really just fully realigned around wanting to be the energy transition capital. And so it's really an important leader and signal for what happens in Houston. And kind of as a related note, usually we get into other news later, but I saw Vestas was opening an office in Houston. I think that's like direct result of Hetty's kind of effort to build Houston up as an energy transition capital. And for those of you who don't know, Vestas is one of the biggest wind turbine manufacturers out there. And it's kind of a big deal that they're putting a big foothold here. And so I think part of their role is creating that ecosystem at the corporate level, um, and then also helping to market Houston nationally in a way that's different than what we do. Yeah, and so the advisory group we got together was folks interested in Houston. I think Hetty itself, or the partnership itself, extends its reach beyond downtown. It actually covers, I think I heard it was like over a dozen counties, kind of in the greater Houston area. And on that advisory board meeting, there were individuals from Austin and around Dallas, which I thought was very interesting and just surprising for me personally. Um, and one of the big topics I think of discussion, I think different members bring topics to the bear with the group, was discussions on SMR policy. And my first thought is it's not steam methane reforming. This is actually small modular reactors. And I think at the state level, there's a big effort to make Texas a leader in nuclear power. Nuclear is not always in the renewables category. It's something that, as a technology, hasn't had a lot of investment for the last 30 to 40 years at a commercial level, but where the technology has really advanced at the national lab level. And I think Texas is ranked as the seventh most ready state for nuclear. So I think generally people here want to be at the top, but being number seven is not something they're excited about. And so there's a question of what policies can be put into place to encourage nuclear development. And for better or worse, this is uranium nuclear, not fusion nuclear. And small modular reactors relate to basically nuclear reactors that should be able to be mass manufactured on an assembly line. By assembly line, we're talking about like less than 100, but still where you're building them kind of repeatedly. And they use a different type of fuel source that's safer, can run on kind of the depleted uranium or wasted uranium that's used in the older generation of nuclear reactors, and generally can provide a lot of power. Um, the challenge with these reactors is there's I think only one commercial project that's kind of shoveled to the ground right now, and everything in this policy speaks to the growth and demand on the grid. But the soonest these reactors will probably be a reality is about 5 to 7 years for the first pilot, and really 10 years before they putting to shovel like big nuclear projects. And so this is really looking way far in the future of how do you create base load power for a grid that might be 3 times as large as what we have today when you include things like hyperscaler demand and just regular load growth. Um, and one of the challenges or counterpoints to a nuclear strategy is, it's a very long process to get that built. The reality is you can go out and get a solar plus battery project on the I think it's like 100 megawatt level, kind of deployed in 2 years. And so it's a question of, if we have the load demand today, what do we got to do? How do we bring that power online? But nuclear is that kind of important third leg for having a durable base load power that would complement something like geothermal, which you can't put everywhere. So that was an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I think nuclear is one of the focus areas for the new administration.
Hmm.
Hydrogen's on there, geothermal's on there, nuclear's on there, and I think it's really an opportunity for not only Texas but everywhere else in the U.S. because um, all over, I would say, the Western world, we have really neglected nuclear over the past, I would say, 2 decades,
Hmm.
uh, mostly because of some bad incidents, 3 Mile Island, and others. But it is still one of the most sustainable, if you can call it
Mm.
that, base load options. And it being a focus area, I'm hoping that we could make a lot more development in the next 4 years. There'll be more funding going to this. We don't know yet exactly how much. Um, I wasn't sure how many nuclear plants there are in Texas. Do you know, Jason, anything about that?
I actually do not know. I know where
So
the
I just put
yeah.
it
Go ahead.
on Perplexity. There are two nuclear power
Okay.
plants in
Oh,
Houston. Sorry,
yeah,
not
and
in
there's
Houston, in Texas. Yeah,
yeah,
each with two reactors.
and and I think they talked about at that session that there's actually a
Mm,
development reactor at Texas A&M, which is like right on
okay.
campus, and that's where they do testing essentially of they can test different
Yeah.
fuel types and things there.
Yeah, so there's one in close to Fort Worth.
Hmm.
And then there's one in South Texas. There's a South Texas project located in Matagorda County.
Hmm.
So super interesting to see there's some progress. There's a third nuclear power plant that is planned for the future in Seadrift, Texas, which is
Got it.
developed by Dow and X Energy.
Okay, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the one that they were proposing gets support here. So I think what the discussion was about was that there's I think legislative recommendations in front of the state to consider. I think there are two different bills. Couldn't tell you how that process works, but there were a couple of things they're looking for. One, they're trying to build kind of a centralized agency to coordinate those efforts. They actually need to get the permitting process figured out, and so they want like a permitting officer or permitting czar to kind of facilitate that, so you can actually do projects in Texas. And then they're looking at how do you train a workforce to run nuclear facilities, and how do you build the equipment. Right, there's the reactors, there's the balance of plant, and there's the actual turbines that need to go into these systems. And then they also realize that there's a lot of education that needs to go on to support that kind of nuclear effort. I think because of the issues you described, there's a lot of NIMBYism when it relates to nuclear. One of the biggest challenges with the earlier versions of nuclear, of course, was the spent fuel ends up needing to like be stored for about 10,000 years. And the newest generation of nuclear is better. It has I think the waste needs to be managed for about 200 years, so still a long time, but obviously a lot less radioactive. But nobody wants that in their backyard. And I think as much as nuclear is kind of the clean technology, it does have some challenges with that shares in common with like
Hmm.
traditional carbon intensive fossil fuels, and that the some of the waste streams are externalized to the company. Meaning, just because we don't have a carbon tax in the U.S. on fossil fuel carbon production, it's not clear to me how nuclear fuel is socialized. If that's something that's borne by the state, or if that's which is us, or if that's borne by the company that kind of maintains and holds the nuclear power plant. And I think we see classically a lot of resource extraction, a lot of times mediation and things like that often get held by the public sector when a company moves on and out. And 200 years is a lot of time to kind of manage nuclear waste. Um,
Hmm.
and there we
Yeah, I
go.
see.
Lofty is talking about
Yeah,
who guarantees that cost. And so one of the requests with specific dollars is they're looking for $5 billion in underwriting for project loans and cost guarantees. And again, I'm not sure how that all works in mechanics, but that's the legislation that's kind of sitting or going in front of the Texas House. So I guess as a technologist and as founders, I think the question is where can we go here to kind of tap into the potential opportunity if it's coming. I think obviously there are technology companies that are working on the actual reactors themselves. I think Jan is talking about Allo Atomics, and then we obviously have X Energy, um, and they are developing the actual plant. There's going to be EPCs who put technologies together, but there's also okay. Here we go. Nuclear engineering company is what Jan is
yeah,
describing. But there's also the support services. There's the advanced materials that are needed to support these things. Um, the ability to support the turbo machinery, provide spare parts, and the advanced materials that are kind of nuclear resilient are an opportunity here. So when you think about the supply chain, who can make the components and service them is an opportunity here in Houston as well. And you think about all that kind of supply coming in through the port. It gives us an opportunity for startups to kind of jump in, be it 3D manufacturing, advanced casting technologies, or or other types of like robotic type manufacturing. So it'll definitely be interesting.
yeah. I was gonna send a link to Jan if he wants to jump in at some point. He can also tell us about Atomics if he knows more about it. But I also thought um, um, we were going to also touch on Venture University.
Hmm.
That's an event that Jan hosted. Just trying to find him um, here. And if anyone else, by the way, if you anyone else wants to join us live and kind of, I don't know what I'm linking here. Hold on. I want to make sure I'm linking the right thing for him. But yeah, if anyone else wants to join us live, you're free to do that. Just let us know and I'll send you a link. I don't want to put the link right on this chat um, until we get a bit more comfortable with our audience. But Jan, I'm going to send you a link. I think Vasily, did he have a question? Yeah, please
Yeah.
free to ask us any question that you want while I
Do you,
figure this link
do you
out.
want? So I'll talk a little bit about the Venture University
Mhm.
Investor Accelerator and kind of my takeaways. So I think last week we had Jan come on and talk a little bit about it. We went to the event, got to see some old faces. I think Christine Galeb was in town for that and in another event, and she obviously was at the Ion with Jan. And I think it was a good presentation overall, a good crowd of people there. I think Sky, who presented, has a very impressive portfolio of companies he's invested in. And what I didn't appreciate was Venture University was a kind of a fresh approach to kind of building a venture firm that was scalable, meaning you could kind of tap into a large group of really smart people, teach them how to do venture investing, and use that to kind of build your funnel to pull in deals, and then have those individuals kind of act as the deal principals. And so it really allows that organization to kind of train people at scale, source deals at scale, and then deploy capital. And then part of what they do is set up structures so that you can bring in kind of SPVs or smaller amounts of capital, but there's like a core fund that does a lot of the investments. So it's just like as a person thinking about like novel structures in energy, I thought it was very creative, or not energy, sorry, in venture. I thought it was very creative. Um, and
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how that grows.
Yeah.
It is interesting in context where I heard a rumor that also like Andreessen Horowitz and General Catalyst are thinking about an IPO. Those are all on the rumor mill. But when you think about like how does venture become kind of a company that has these alternative ways to create liquidity, it's just very interesting what people are coming up with, and it's not necessarily the tried and true limited partners and limited number of GPs in a venture fund that is scalable. And I think there were some other interesting aspects, but not I don't know what else
Yeah, no, I
you
thought it was a
follow.
great event.
Yeah.
We had Skylar come down,
Mhm.
who's really the founder of Venture University, and really glad that Jan was able to bring him here because Jan Odegaard has been taking he's been part of the cohort for the Venture University, and the way they run is, plugging in for for them is. Every semester there's and I think it runs for 3 months. It's like every quarter, so you can join for 4 semesters if you want, 4 quarters, or you can just join for one. And it starts with like a 1 week intensive masterclass to get you the basics. But what I really liked about this program that I thought was different, because I've also myself taken a venture capital and private equity program, was that there's a lot of practical experience that they give
Mhm.
you. So they call it the a venture accelerator or investor accelerator, where
Mhm.
you actually go in and become an investor. You meet every week and you can bring deals to the table yourself, which I thought was great. Having people from Houston being part of this program, they can bring in Houston deals, local deals, and then you do due diligence together. And then so it's not only you who might be a new investor, but then you have like very experienced investors like Sky and others who've had 10 years of experience. And Sky was very um, explicit on that you need to trust people who have like at least 10 years of experience if they're going to be teaching you that, and they have that at Venture University. And I think it's really that practical experience that allows you to really hone in everything that you learn in the master class, like the theoretical stuff, that I learned in the courses that I took. But I myself feel like what I'm really lacking is going in there, getting your hands dirty, and actually doing due diligence, looking at the numbers, and looking at how can we strengthen these deals. Um, yeah. So they announced that they're coming to Houston. What does that mean? Is that if there's enough people who sign up for Venture University, Jan will help and facilitate that, and we can have in-person sessions. So you're not just joining remotely and virtually. You're actually building your investment community here in Houston. And I think it's great for Houston because that's really something that we need to start nurturing. We have our own investor program at Energy Tech Nexus, and I think this would be a really good complement for that, as we have experienced and also new investors coming in. And one of the things that we spoke about is how investing in Houston is going to be different because we're very energy focused, which also means that we're very hard tech focused, which means that there are different timelines we're thinking about. They're different. The scale of funding that we're talking about, like 1-2 million doesn't cut it for us to run a
Mhm.
pilot. We're thinking even for a seed funding, you might need 20 million. And then as you go up to a bigger commercial facility, you need hundreds of millions to actually be able to build those projects out. And you need to be kind of creative on your financing. So you have to match that venture capital with grants, with non-dilutive funding, with other kind of financing that might be available. Previously, we had the loans that were
Mhm.
available from the DOE. We don't know how that's going to play out in the future, but also, working with banks, at some point you will get to project financing. How do you do that? Um, and there, when it comes to project financing, we have the expertise here in Houston because we run these multi-billion-dollar projects. But how do you then bring those project finance people into your project, which is a first of a kind? So I think that entire like knowledge building and education that needs to happen in our ecosystem, having the likes of Venture University come to Houston, we start having those conversations and really start building our expertise on the financing side, because to actually be able to get these projects off the ground, you don't need only just the technology to be validated, you also need the business models to be validated.
Yeah, and I think something Jan said a couple of times, which I think is worth repeating here. Like, just because we have investors in Houston, they still have a fiduciary responsibility to return capital, so they're going to find the best deals. But the more investors we have who have their kind of specific lens, where they have their expertise in Houston, and kind of translating that back to the founders and providing mentorship, the better the companies will be. And so this is having more investor groups and more people kind of trained in how to be venture investors is just going to be better for our community, and hopefully we can get that flywheel spinning more, because as everyone knows on this show, I'm very critical of the early stage venture community in Houston, and I think Sky even repeated it. We like oil and gas deals too much, which means it looks like real estate, and just the terms are just funky or antithetical to what we see in other technology development markets. And so the more people get this different style of investing, it'll be better for everyone. I
Hmm.
saw Vasily asked a question. I want to talk a little bit about determined to lead for about 5 minutes, and then I will think of a really smart answer for Vasily while you share with us what happened at
Yeah, while
the
you think
Chevron.
about that, let me update you on our really amazing event that we had on Friday, our Determined to Lead lunch, which is really focused on featuring women leaders within the energy transition space and have them share with determined to lead men and women. What's the latest, and really we try to choose a topic that we can go deep in, and learn from one another. So we've had presenters present on CCS in cement plants. We have had Gabriella from McKinsey talk about construction, and how we're looking at building in a more sustainable way. And so this on Friday we did it at the Chevron studio, which is at the Ion. They have this beautiful space that they've made, and made it such that it's very conducive to innovation. A lot of teams go there and do a lot of team building, and a lot of creative exercises happen there. So it's a beautiful space, and great for any inspiration anyone needs if they're building any innovative spaces. So we were really honored to be able to use this space. We had Monica and Lynn Rouse, who presented to us. And Lynn is running the Chevron studio. So we learned a lot about what is the Chevron studio, and I'm surprised how many of us probably didn't know about this. And this is right here in Houston. Chevron has this amazing program in which they bring in technology from university and try to get it ready for field trials. So they have like 3 different phases. They help them through discovery. So they discover, build, and launch the next generation of innovative startups by taking these from either national labs or from university. And we can touch on why that's important later, Jason. Then how do we scale those technologies up? So I'm just looking at one of the slides that they shared, which was a really good representation. Then they de-risk the investment opportunities to accelerate speed to market for early stage startups, through expert technical assistance and validation. So Chevron having its expertise base, they can really go in and focus and help these companies scale up, and eventually get them to field trial. So they have, I think, 4 cohorts a year. They try to bring in 4 to 5 companies, which I think I was impressed that they're able to find that many and bring them through the program. And she kind of said, their goal is if they could get 1 to field trial from those cohort, they're happy.
Mhm.
And then there was another slide about their technologies areas that I want to briefly mention. As people might be curious, so carbon utilization, hydrogen and renewable energy storage systems, wireless power, solutions for circular economy, which I thought was interesting that they had that on there, and robotics. So those are their areas. So if you think that you have a technology that fits any one of those areas, you should definitely reach out to Chevron Studio, as they'd be interested in talking to you. Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to touch on, because I asked this to Jason, I was like, why is it important that Chevron
Mm.
has that kind of as a requirement that the technology has to be from university or the national labs?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenges when thinking about technology startup, one of many challenges, I should say, is really understanding what your defensive moat is around a technology. And an IP moat or a defensive moat gives you pricing power in the market. And what are we talking about here with technology? It's the ability to be the only person who can kind of deploy a new technique or a new technology that no one else can legally copy. And if your system is so valuable, then that kind of gives you the ability to arbitrage the market and create value for yourself, generate cash flow for your investors, and also just makes it very differentiated. And so, from a venture capital perspective, there is a significant value in going after technologies that have come out of a research lab versus solutions that were kind of developed out of an engineering mind. And if you think about it, someone who kind of pulls together and looks at a problem and says, I'm going to source different pieces of technology and puts it into an engineer package, there's a lot less like work that goes into it. Maybe you spend $500,000 to $2 million on engineering. Versus if you go to a university, a lot of times that research is actually built on 10 to $20 million of other research grants and other work, and it's built on a professor and their lab doing continuous research on a specific topic over decades. And so suddenly the like know-how is literally years ahead of anyone else. A lot of times you're just commercializing just the point of the spear or the last bit of technology that really allows for the change and control of kind of the mechanics of the physics. Um, so that it's that like novelty that is hard. In many ways, anyone can kind of come up with an engineered solution if they're kind of smart enough. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of put a system together. And maybe the best analogy here is if you look at like a laptop computer. A laptop has a lot of little pieces that are kind of pulled together, and there are a lot of different form factors for them. It's a very commodity market. There's not a lot of gross margin in that business. You can still build a big business. It's just not very profitable. Each unit is not very profitable. The thing that is valuable is actually like the little chips inside the computer. Very hard to build, very hard to copy. I think before Intel had its current trouble, something like 50% of the value of a laptop was just in the Intel chip, in the Pentium processor. And so that's the distinction is like there's years and years of intellectual property that was built into those chips. They get monetized, whereas the kind of package itself is not worth that much. And so going back to the story, going to university, that deep technical differentiation is a proxy for value. It's a proxy for what can create really demonstrable change. That is a step change in kind of how an operation works. And so that's always a kind of a struggle that I think we see here in Houston is that balance between creating a solution that solves a problem today versus a very deep technology that might come out of a university. There's room in the world for both. Not every technology has to come out of university, but it is a strategy to look at these kind of deep tech where there's something novel enough to kind of warrant the investment from a Chevron. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you explained it really well because I mean, you can engineer a solution together, but a lot of the pieces that you're putting them together are already validated and tested in the market.
Exactly. Anyone else can kind of go out and source
Yeah.
them. And so, like,
Mhm,
how different can you make it
mhm,
other than just being a very good product manager, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah. So, and this is really about taking technologies that haven't really been completely tested and getting them to the level that you actually test them, do the trial. It's new technology that needs to go through this journey of validation.
Yeah,
And-
but you create huge amounts of value doing it. So it's
Yes.
like it's
Yes.
a fantastic piece to go through, and even a 1 out of 4 kind of success rate is still fantastic and just very meaningful for the founder. And I think a lot of times, even a technologist coming out of a university needs to figure out: is there a market? Is there a use case? And having that direct customer feedback is invaluable, and importantly, it saves time for the inventor because they got to
Mm,
figure out like where they want to spend their most valuable resource, which is their time.
mm. Okay. Do we want to answer some of these questions
Yeah.
that are coming in before we move on to what's coming for this week?
Yeah, no, this is a good pause and segment. I think Vasily is the only major question here. So
Yeah.
Vasily's question is, and I'll say it out loud for the recording. as a founder, how do you get past the I think the front line of manufacturing and service organizations when you're an OEM manufacturer? A lot of times you're at a unfavorable position because you're a startup and you have to deal with lead times and you have to manage vendors where you're just the least important customer. And so, if you're a smaller like energy services company, you might be only putting in $100,000 order, which is very big for you, but you're going to be competing for machine time or capacity against an incumbent like a Schlumberger or Halliburton, who might regularly be putting in $1 million orders quarterly, for example. And so I think the challenge here is a real one. Like it's the fact is you're kind of not important as a customer to these manufacturing partners, and so you're kind of the tail on the dog whenever it comes to forming a new relationship with the manufacturer. Um, and just like any kind of trusted relationship, people like to work with who they like to work with. They know that it's going to be a very consistent revenue stream, and so you are always kind of the last one when it comes to vendor support. We we had a situation with one of my companies where we were the newest customer, and when they were running into supply constraint, the manufacturer just said, "Hey, sorry, we're just not going to make your product this year," and we got bumped back 3 months. And you can't blame them. Like they're making the right decision that's best for their business. It is just business at the end of the day. Um, and so there's a couple of ways to combat this, unfortunately, and they're all just more expensive. This is like why startups don't have economies of scale. One is you just got to lock in working capital. And so sometimes you raise that from equity. That is a big portion for a manufacturing business. Is to raise outside capital and just float your inventory. Investors hate that though, because the working capital is not being used to grow sales or grow other things. So if you can tap into equity or put in a mezzanine financing, it is a financial tool. It gives you the ability to kind of lock in pricing and lock in a longer supply chain, and assume you're going to get bumped. And if you don't plan it well, it's also the biggest thing that will kick you in the butt, because if your sales start to grow, then your working capital grows in time. And if you don't have the ability to kind of bring in that financing, working capital will limit your business. So it's a double-edged sword. That's one solution. The other is worse terms. You got to pay a premium or accept less favorable shipping or manufacturing priority. One way to think about it as a startup is the cost of your capital is very high. So either I could pay for that capital by sitting and waiting for the inventory to ship, or I can pay expedited manufacturing. And what does that mean for the vendor? They're going to get higher gross margin. It's totally just a choice that you have to make in the hot seat. But if you have staff and you're burning $100,000 a month in just holding your staff in place, it might be worth it just to expedite. And we've definitely done expedites a few times, especially when we had to get spare parts to customers in the field. It's worth it, but it's painful. Um, those are not great strategies because they involve getting money from someone else. A lot of times you only have the money you have. So the other solution, unfortunately, is to find the smaller manufacturers, and not necessarily going for tier one, but for going for those tier two manufacturers who are looking for competition in the space. And importantly, going to the boss or the CEO who's looking to grow their business and sell them on your opportunity, just like you sell your venture capitalist. You're finding a partner, you want to lock in a long-term relationship, and you want to go from being $100,000 to their next $1 million account. And it's got to be strategic for the manufacturing partner, because now you are bringing them the opportunity to provide kind of competitive positioning against a customer. Meaning sometimes when a customer is so big and they own so much of the revenue book for a manufacturing partner, they can demand a lot of terms that are really painful for the manufacturer. And we see this where a lot of times in long-term relationships, payments are net 90 days. They don't have to pay until product is received. And if you're coming in and you are able to convince the business manager or the owner there that you're going to come in, you're going to pay upfront, and you're going to grow it to be a big account, that gives them strategically the ability to manage their cash flow better if you do in fact kind of grow the business in a big meaningful way. And I think like anyone who's kind of deploying capital, they're gonna make that bet on you to see if they can grow you as a customer, because it gives them better positioning in their marketplace. And so it's not just about the purchase order that you might be negotiating with the head of sales or the person who's just measuring gross margin, but getting to the person who's a business manager who has to think about kind of their positioning in a broader marketplace and how they manage their own cash, frankly. So those are kind of the strategies you have to deal with. But honestly, kind of sucks being being the smallest customer trying to bring something out. You just have to pay the most, and that's your lack of scale in the marketplace. Hopefully, those are helpful. I don't know if anyone else has other suggestions they've seen, but that's kind of the reality of why it's so expensive to get started.
I see Jan has joined our green room, so I'm gonna bring him on. Um, I know we kind of spoke about Venture University already, but did you have any thoughts?
No, I think
Jan?
you guys did an amazing job covering it. So
Good.
kudos to you guys. You obviously were listening while you were up there.
Okay,
So
good,
that
good.
I think the one thing that is interesting that you maybe didn't touch on was really the fund's interest in sort of staying true to its roots, being sort of that early stage fund, and that's one of the things they focus on because funds often tends to try, every time they raise a new fund, it's like, oh yeah, last time we had 100 million, next time we want 200 million, and then 500 million. And the problem with that from an early stage is that you cannot play in the early stage anymore because your
Mhm.
checks are not big enough. You don't get to deploy it fast enough. Now, Sky and the team has decided that they want to have a fund in sort of the 30 to 70 million and not sort of deviate from that. It's part of their hack. So they will invest in, seed and Series A, occasionally Series B, maybe pre-seed for the right deals. So that's one of the things, and that's one of the complaints we've seen in Houston is like we don't have enough early stage capital, and so I'm excited about that, and also being part of the deal team allows the participant to kind of build your own portfolio because you're encouraged to claim the deals you're working on and that you have invested in maybe through the syndicate. This is now my portfolio when you go on to start your own.
Mhm.
So you actually have something to point to where you have made a decision and pitched them to the principals of the fund. So that also helps you if you want to launch your own syndicate or your own fund afterwards to be a fund manager. Because as Sky pointed out, by the time you deploy your third fund, meaning about 10 years in since you started, only then do you know if you're actually any good at it.
Yeah.
And that's important because there is no cash on cash before you really get pretty 5 to 7 years in, and by that time most investors have raising or have raised their third fund and start deploying the third fund. So it's an interesting space that I think it's ripe for Houston to dive into, and we need more people. So if you're anybody listening is interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to me, mention my name and you fill out an application. That also helps because they'll direct you, and then so I can get in touch with you and help.
Yeah. I'll be honest, when we were in the session, I started texting Nada. I was like, "Do we want to sign up?" And I'm like, "I think we want to sign up for this." And for better or worse, our discussion with each other is we're so busy. This is so intense, and the program looks so deliberate that I'm not sure we would be able to create the time. And I think what Sky was articulating in terms of the target kind of I guess user or participant is someone who is in a kind of career transition or is looking to add a new skill. I think you mentioned there was like a startup arama that was kind of, or startup madness. It is an intense program, and I think I'm looking at it going, this feels like it would be worth the money, or I know it would definitely be worth money, but it's a question of like, would we be able to do it justice? And that
Well,
was
I mean,
a real concern.
yeah,
Yeah.
you are right, Jason. I mean, the first week, the master class where you get all the theory, I mean, it's literally 5 full days of topic. And then the second week, which is the startup madness, it is 3 days where you literally every hour there's at least three startups you're meeting with.
Mhm.
And so you kind of have to, the two first week is the most intense. And then it kind of it's more on your own because now you're getting into being an apprentice where you're actually out there sourcing deals, trying to convince team members that that this is a worthy deal to take forward, doing the due diligence, getting beaten up by the partners on partners meetings because you don't have all the answers that you thought you had, because you're convicted because you love the people and you love the company and the technology and you want them to succeed. Well, an investor needs to look at this objectively. So it's all of that, an iteration of that. And then ultimately, if you get sort of the thumbs up, preparing the investor committee deck and pitch the committee deck. And so, but then you also get to sit in on all the other ones where you learn through all the other ones that are succeeding and failing along those road. And, we see about 5,000 deals per quarter. We invest in, 5 to 7. And then we do follow-in investment in a couple of them. So it is an interesting journey. You're right. It tries at least 2 weeks. You're pretty much full time.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, but that's good to know. Like that's something we can kind of carve out when we're ready for that. Maybe do it like when things slow down for us, like in the summer. July time. I don't know when. They probably have specific timings when they have those master classes.
This starts every quarter. The next one starts March 31, and then you can just do a quarter and it ends. And we have people that take all 4 quarters. We have people that just takes 1 quarter, and we have a few people that start out by just wanting to do the master class, and then they realize, oh my goodness, I don't know how to apply it. I need to learn how to apply it. So they just then add on the cohort.
That's great. Well, we had so much to talk about. I know we have a few more minutes left. I'd love to talk about, and Jan, please stay on as we talk about what's coming in Houston over this next week or two, because there's some really exciting things going on. We as Energy Tech Nexus, we're organizing our first low carbon investment summit together with Metro National and Flathead Forge. So we're really excited about that. Jason, I'll hand it over to you to just give us a little brief of who'll be presenting, what we'll be pitching. This is going to be an event that we're going to do every year, and so this year is kind of like a little pilot, and we're going to scale it to be even bigger next year.
Yeah. So we're doing this over in the Metro National in 800 Gessner Road, which is right next to our co-working facility. And we're doing it right in the lobby. It's a new format for us. It's a symposium. So the idea is to get people to have a conversation and engage with each other. We're going to have 6 companies kind of get up and do a 5-minute pitch. We're going to have a couple of panels discussing kind of the pipeline of technology from industry from the lab and how it gets into industry. But half the time is honestly just networking. And so we're kind of mixing the panels and the pitching with about half-hour sections for people to connect. And then we have about a dozen startups kind of sprinkled throughout that lobby where they have the ability to connect with a small group of people at a time. So I wouldn't really call it a pitch meeting where you're constantly speed networking. It's one where people kind of come in, join a conversation, and we'll see how that format goes. We've never done it like this before. Hopefully it'll be fun and importantly create good, meaningful connections so you have a real conversation about your business. And that'll run tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So it's about a 4-hour chunk. We are providing lunch. It is preceded in the morning by a cup of joey out there at the Metro National Building. So we'll be excited for that. And then I think it's also not public, but our partners over at the Low Carbon Alliance are also hosting their event. I forget what their name is right now.
Oh yes, the low carbon society.
Low Carbon Society, yes.
Yes, Low Carbon Society, and they're hosting. Again, it's an invite only with some of the people that are going to be in town with some of the CCS activity happening in Houston. So that's going to be in downtown, a happy hour that we're hosting. And if you want to know more about that, send us a message. I think we're pretty booked on that, but there might be some availability. That's tomorrow evening.
And I think totally coincidental because I wasn't paying attention that there was a CCUS conference in town this week.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's why they're doing it, because they have some people coming in from the Middle East.
Yep.
So that's so we wanted to showcase to them, the people who are in the CCS ecosystem. I also want to talk about the Energy Tech Market event because Sarah Week
Mhm.
is soon after next week. So we're kind of back to back with events. And we at Energy Tech Nexus are hosting, again, an event that's going to become an annual event, an Energy Tech Market Summit on
Mhm.
Thursday, March the 13th. And there we're bringing 9 scale ups from Canada, from Atlantic Canada, that are really revenue positive, one of the best companies within energy and energy transition space from Canada will be down here. You'll get to hear their pitches. Um, and we have, 5 sessions actually, because we're also bringing in geothermal in there this year. We have offshore technologies, carbon management, industrial monitoring, and stakeholder engagement. And then we have geothermal. That'll be our last session. So you can search that by going on Luma and looking for Energy Tech Nexus, Energy Tech Market event, and you'll get more information on that. Also, if you want to sign up for some B2B meetings to actually meet these startups, if you're an investor, if you are from a CVC, are interested in what are the new cutting edge technologies, you get to have exclusive 15-minute access to these startups. And we'll organize that for you. Just send me a DM, put a comment on this post if you're watching the recording, and we'll be happy to loop you in.
Yeah, it's gonna be a busy, good 2 weeks for energy.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'm,
going
I'm
to be a
pretty
lot of
excited.
fun. If you're going to be
Yeah.
at Sarah Week, I will be there most of the week. Juliana will probably be there partly. Jason's going to be around. Where you can find us at the Canada House. They're a partner of ours. They have a big partnership with the S&P Global for Sarah Week. So we'll be at Canada House with some of these Canadian companies, and we'll be walking around. So come by and say hi to us.
Good.
What else?
Do we want to talk about kind of financings the last week?
Yes, let's do that for the last
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
Yeah, so big shout out
Mhm.
to ETN member Midico. They've raised $4.3 million financing. This is a carbon capture company. They have a technology that they put on the back of smokestacks, essentially, or the exhaust plume stacks of power plants, and to capture the carbon. The reason you do it there is it's warm, and I think that's part of the ability to induce chemical reaction. But two, like the carbon is saturated. So if you think about like direct air capture that's out in the environment, there's it's like 400 parts per million of carbon in the smokestack. If you've like burned your oxygen perfectly, then it ends up being closer to 10%, which is a lot more and a lot easier to capture. Medico's in LA. They did survive the fires, but I think Clement there, we first connected with him. I'm going to say the Rice Business Plan competition 2 years ago. So it's been a long journey, but well deserved. And they've got a good technology coming out of university environment, and we're glad for them. And they're also, I think, in early pilot stages, so they got a lot of the good stuff coming together for their business. And then coincidentally, I saw there were like 2 other like carbon deals that got funded. I think I saw Carbon Quest raised $20 million, and then Terra CO2 raised $82 million, and that was more of a Series B. But clearly, people are still deploying capital into carbon capture and storage, which kind of speaks to the momentum of that space, irrespective of kind of what the national politics are.
Mhm.
My like naive assumption was there would have been some pullback, but we're definitely seeing people double down in this space, and it's because the economics are there. People
Yeah.
are not going to continue to invest if they don't think there's going to be business over the next 4 years.
Yeah. And I also want to mention a software solution for
Mhm.
keeping track of your methane emissions.
Mhm.
A Houston-based company called Envana Software. They are actually a spin-off out of Halliburton.
Mhm.
And they have they've made a joint venture together with a private equity firm from New York called Singular Gulf. And they got 5.2 million in federal and non-federal funding, and most of that is federal funding. So there is
Hmm.
funding. I know there's a lot of grants that have been put on hold, but this is specifically going to a company that's developing technology for the oil and gas sector to monitor and reduce their methane emissions. and 4.2 million come from the DOE, and 1 million is non-federal funding. So really exciting to also see that they're getting funded, they're expanding, Houston-based company. I also saw that Base Power, quite
Mhm.
successful in Austin. It's a battery company that's moving to Houston, so it's going to be available to Houston clients. And I thought that was great because it's an alternative to solar and battery. So if that's what you're thinking you want to have in your homes as a backup, because Houston's, I think, the city that needs the most amount of backup because of the weather events that we have in the region. And over the past couple of years, people have started installing a lot of gas generators. I mean, it's a big issue in Houston. So it'll be interesting to see them
Mhm.
expand into Houston. One more news I wanted to share from Houston was one of our investors, Adil Jaffrey, who has his venture firm Ecosphere. They have made an investment in a fusion company from Virginia. So they've partnered with a venture firm for Virginia for this fusion company called Near Star Fusion. I don't know much about that, but that's something I want to read more about. But that's interesting to see that Houston investors are investing and deploying in some of these technologies, not only in Houston, but from all different parts of the US. Yeah.
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 Good. No, I think energy, part of being in the energy
Mhm.
capital is we get to see all the energy
Mhm.
deal flow, and it's good for our investors also have that kind of breadth. And so I think while we're trying to bring investors into Houston to engage in the early stage, we also want to bring in companies who should engage here. And so staying on top of things like the nuclear
Mhm.
policy we talked about before obviously ties back to trying to be supportive when those companies raise their hand and say they're ready to come in and engage with our broader
Yeah.
ecosystem.
And I'm just reading here what Nearstar actually does. It uses its plasma railgun technology
Okay.
to safely and affordably power base load electricity on and off the grid through a magnetized target impact fusion approach. So something new and different. Um,
Interesting.
there's also the Rice Business Plan competitions that's happening in April, and the 59 companies, no, 52 student-led companies have been selected. So the Rice Business Plan
Good.
competition is one of the biggest in the world. There's the most amount of funding that's available through this competition for student-led companies. Um, they have selected their 52 companies. You can find them on the Rice website. And last year, the company that got the most funding, just to give people an idea, was Harvard's Mesa Quantum. That was developing accurate and precise chip scale
Mm,
clocks.
mhm.
So they got the biggest sum, but the one that actually won was a surprising one. It was Protein Pints.
Oh, don't even tell me. Don't even tell me. I'm not going to judge non-energy companies.
It's a low sugar
No,
ice
they
cream
had a really
product.
good pitch.
I was like, Houston being such a, like
No,
a hard tech capital, like we went with going for an ice cream company. So interesting.
no, I'm not surprised
Yeah.
about that one because like the Houston Angel Network
Yeah.
and Texas
Mm.
Angels like to fund consumer
Okay.
packaged goods,
Mm.
and so it's funny like maybe we don't notice it here, but if you go into a gas station, it is amazing how many different types of soda we sell in
Yeah.
Texas. Like everything from whatever it is, Big Red, which I didn't realize tastes like cotton candy, all the way up to like Honesty and everything. Like that's very Houstonian. I think when I was in New England, like the selection of soft drinks was one tenth
Mm.
as much. And so I think we're very much like investors here like to put some capital into these like food, packaged goods, and just give people a chance because we will eat everything here in Houston. So I'm not surprised. But those guys had a really good presentation. They're really animated, and you could tell they would raise. They could go
Mm.
off and raise money. So I wasn't surprised that they won. I was surprised how much the quantum company raised because honestly I don't know how important timekeeping is. I don't know
Mm.
like I don't appreciate kind of the distinction on how a quantum based system would create that kind of step change and improvement and who would buy it. And I think this kind of goes into the silicon chip kind of world where if you can make things better and cheaper and more reliably, it is undoubtable you can put a little temporal resonator in any kind of system out there. But I think as a layperson, not understanding how timing works, I don't know why you would pick that chip design versus another one unless there is like so much value in precision. And I say this because like the clocks in my house are always off by a few minutes, so I'm not the person
Yeah.
who's like
So I
cares
think
about being on
what
time.
I understood
You know,
from their presentation is like it's actually a lot got to do with the GPS.
I think that's
That's
the
the
killer app,
killer,
like the
right?
one
Like,
where
it's the
like
GPS
better
because the
location.
example they
Yeah,
gave was, like, these Teslas crashing when they go into the tunnel, and,
yeah.
because they're not able to, like, connect with the satellite or whatever, and then when you're not able to do that or if you're off, it can cause, some, yeah, big, casualties. So, yeah, there's a lot I learned from that presentation and yeah. So were you surprised that they're the one that were able to raise that much? I think they
Yeah,
got the
I'm
most
just
amount,
surprised
yeah.
that
I was surprised
yeah,
with the
I'm just surprised that the
yeah,
buyers were that well established, but maybe it's that
yeah,
differentiated, and that's the reality of, as we talked
yeah,
before, there's between an engineered solution and something with really
yeah,
fundamental kind of IP under it that, like, clearly was unique in the
yeah.
marketplace.
No, I'm really
So,
excited to see the companies that are coming in, this year because I really enjoy that competition. There's so much you learn, like, we learned so much about clocks last time. So who knows what we're gonna learn about this time? And then just seeing those companies progress from like the first time we see them, and then when they do their final pitches, like in 2 days, how much stronger they become. Really fun to watch, their energy. Mm,
so what I would suggest for
mm,
founders here in the Houston ecosystem is sign up to be a
a judge.
a judge or
Mm,
reviewer. One, you get to meet some interesting people at the award show the next day, so it's good networking there. And but you also like learn a lot from just how other people present. These short presentations are are very short. They have to be kind of in calibration mode, but you can definitely see who's good at presenting and who's not good, who's practiced, who really resonates. And just as like an observer, I think it's helpful for internalizing how you present and what makes for an engaging presentation. And unfortunately, fundraising is a little bit of a popularity contest, and being able to spot what makes for an
mm,
animated, an investable presentation is just a lesson worth learning.
yeah. Um,
So I would recommend joining as a
yeah,
judge.
exactly. No, it's a lot of fun to join as a judge. While I'm doing this, I'm also fixing like these little things that we can do with the live stream, the little headings we can put on. So getting a feel of it. Okay, we went quite a
Oh,
bit
look at that.
over today, but we had a lot to talk about. And it may be the same next week. I can't wait to share with everybody what happens tomorrow at the Low Carbon Investment Summit. What are our key takeaways? Stay tuned for that. And thank you for joining us.
All right. See
See
ya.
ya.